So hey guys, that fall weather feels like it's starting to show up a little bit more and more here. I've been out the last couple of nights doing some different checking on some of our firewood with the moisture meter. Thought I would take you guys along, show you a little bit about how I use this tool and why I use the tool. So this is what I do. I split my firewood open. Firewood dries from the outside in. And if I take a reading here on this piece here, it's showing me it's 4%. There's no way it's 4%. Kiln dried wood is like, what, 12 to 15% or something like that. So what I actually do is I take a piece and I split it. And then I take that freshly exposed side. See, you can see this piece is nice and gray. It's all checked and dried. And then I get this nice big open area here. And I take my moisture meter and I run it with the grain. I've read stuff talking about, oh, you should do it across the grain because then you get a more even reading. However, the way these meters actually work, there's basically a resistance between the prongs. And there is more of a resistance going across than with. And supposedly what I've read is there's a 2% difference between them. So I run it with, and then I take my reading. So this piece right here is coming out to around 22%, which is pretty good. You're looking for somewhere around 20%, the low 20s. I've seen stuff saying 25% less. I've seen other people say 20% or less. So this is the thing that we use our moisture meter the most for. I've done a lot of reading online, and there's a lot of different debates on ways to deal with your firewood. Do you stack your firewood with bark up, or do you stack it with bark down? Do you stack in a whole housing method? Do you stack more in a traditional method? Do you face your piles north-south or east-west? There's just a lot of debates on that type of stuff, and we use our meter to actually run these tests and see if it really works that way for us. I remember reading about this method of stacking several years ago, and I got really excited about it. One, it's you know, it's cool looking. Got a little hut looking type thing, and supposedly this originated out of Europe. But then I've also seen some articles saying it really hasn't. I don't know, to be honest, where it originally came from. But the theory behind this is you got an outside wall basically stacked in a circle, and then you throw all your ugly or your pieces on the inside. There's talk about standing them up on end. I've seen other people where they just throw them in. This is the first time I've done this one where we've just thrown them in versus standing them up on end. But the theory behind this method is it's supposed to create a chimney-like effect that draws that wood through, or the air through, to help dry that wood. However, doing tests over the last several years, haven't really found that to be the case. We a lot of times let these sit bare minimum a year. The one that we burned last year had sat over 2 years, and that was definitely by far the worst burning wood. So here's one of the experiments I'm planning on conducting this year. I haven't tested this myself, and that's the bark up, bark down. And the thought behind this is bark up acts as a shingle, helps shed the rain, but bark up also acts as sort of a barrier that doesn't allow some of that moisture to escape. So when I get all this wood hauled in and it comes time to drag some of the wood out of the woods that I've already brought out, I'm going to take that wood, and let's say I have a round and I split it in half. I'm going to throw one half in one pile and one half in the other pile, so I have the exact same wood in both piles, and I'm going to build a cord of bark up and I'm going to build a cord of bark down, and I'm going to do a little experiment. To be honest, I don't think there's going to be that much of a difference, so I guess we'll wait and see. And when I do tests and stuff, I tend to run a couple tests every year as well, just to reassure my theory. You know, we get some years that get a lot of rain, some years that it's just a real dry, hot season. One thing I'm retesting again this year is, a lot of you guys saw last fall I ended up taking down huge oak tree. I threw some of it over there, so it's an east-west facing pile. I threw some of it over here, which is a north-south facing pile, and also threw or built that whole house back there with some of that oak. So sort of got two tests going on, the north-south versus the east-west, as well as this method versus the whole housing. And to be honest, I really don't think the whole housing method is going to hold up again to that theory, but we'll give it another go. Since I've already built it, might as well test it. So here's my two thoughts on why we value dry firewood so much. I mean, right off the bat, there's nothing more frustrating than trying to get wet wood lit. especially in a cold house. I like to be able to just light that thing and get on with my life and let the stove do what it needs to do instead of babysitting it. Also, taking in consideration of air quality and respect for our neighbors. I mean, think about when you smoke meats. What do you do with those wood chips? You soak them in water to help create more smoke. Well, same sort of deal. You burn wet wood, you're going to get a lot more smoke. The only time you should see smoke coming out of your chimney is either when you just light a fire or you're reloading that stove. Otherwise, you should look up there and you shouldn't even really be able to tell. Maybe you could see a little bit of the heat waves or something coming out of there, but you shouldn't see any smoke coming out of there. Also, you use an excess wood. I mean, you have to burn more wood to help burn off of that moisture. And then, of course, that moisture also creates more creosote. You're not able to burn in the ideal burning temperatures. What is that, 250 or 300 degrees to 500 or 600 degrees? If you don't burn in those temperatures, you create a lot more creosote in your chimney, which then is a fire hazard, you know, a safety issue, and also more maintenance for you to have to go out and clean that chimney more often. Also, a lot of the newer EPA stoves are very picky on that wood. Pretty amazing stuff. We would like to upgrade at some point to a newer EPA stove. Yeah, they are a lot more picky on wood, but they could do, one is cut your firewood use by like a third. Supposedly, you burn like 1/3 the wood, and also you're able to control it quite a bit more, that fire. I've heard of guys with that Blaze King series stove I've talked about in the past, getting 23-hour burns on pine. I mean, granted, you're only going to get so much heat out of that wood, but you're still able to burn very cleanly with that stove and then get that long of burn. I mean, that's something that's pretty impressive. I mean, think about that in the fall time. It's like you want something just to take that heat, that little nip out of the air, and you can get a little stove fire going, dial it way down, keep that going, and not have to attend to it for another 24 hours. Pretty amazing things. Plus, you know, not to mention your all-night burns and stuff, you just get a lot longer burns. So like I mentioned, not a needed tool, especially if you follow some decent practices, but it is nice to have a little bit of that reassurance. It helps you put a little science behind some of the different theories. And I'm sure things vary. You know, elevation probably can play a role in it. Weather conditions can play a role. The species of tree. And that tool just helps you really narrow down and figure out what specifically works well for you in your area and conditions. Kind of keeps you off the forums in some ways. I think about it. You know, you look at a lot of those guys and they get in these big arguments, all this time and energy wasted arguing back and forth, and no one's doing a darn thing about putting some science behind it. Ford versus Chevy, bark up versus bark down. Well, this allows you to kind of shut your mouth, get out there, test it, and move on with life and figure out what actually works well in your area. So, I don't know, just my 2 cents. It's a tool that we really value, but it's something I feel like we could live without as well, but it just kind of helps us make better informed decisions. So thought I would share kind of my thought process on why, how we use that tool, and hopefully it helps someone else out. So hope you guys enjoyed the video, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.
Well, it was in my childhood days, all autumn many long years ago. Now with the spirit